Chapter 11. So that's it, huh? Wedge asked, leaning nonchalantly against one of the old-style Bothan lampposts that lined the park and gazing across the open expanse at the gleaming white dome in the center. That's it, Corran confirmed, frowning at his datapad. At least, according to this it is. Wedge shifted his gaze to the periphery of the park, to the encircling street and the shops with their colorful trade flags that lined it. It was apparently market day, and hundreds of Bothans and alien pedestrians were milling through the area. They must be nuts, he told Corran. Putting a target like that. He broke off as a couple of Duro brushed past him and headed off at an angle across the park. In a public area, he continued in a lower tone, is just begging for trouble. On the other hand, having a pole of your planetary shield array inside your capital city pretty much guarantees the safety of that city, Corran pointed out. That's going to be comforting to all the off-worlders who do business here. The Bothans always have been big on image, Wedge conceded sourly. Even so, he had to admit the place wasn't nearly as vulnerable as it looked. According to the data Bella Bliss had pulled for them, the dome was constructed of a special permasteel alloy, had no windows and only one door, and was filled with armed guards and automated defenses. The shield generator equipment itself was 2 floors underground, with a self-contained backup power supply, a room full of spare parts, and a cadre of on-duty techs who could allegedly take the entire system apart and put it back together again in 2 hours flat. True, but image apart, they've also never been slouches at guarding their own rear ends, Corran pointed out. They'll have safeguards 7 ways from... He stopped as a group of Bothans, chattering animatedly to each other, pushed their way between the 2 humans. A pair of stragglers following the main group were even more self-absorbed. One of them ran straight into Wedge, nearly knocking him over. "My entire clan's apologies, sir," he gasped, his fur rippling with shame and embarrassment as he backed rapidly away, directly towards Corran. Corran tried to sidestep, but the Bothan was already moving too fast and slammed into him too. "You clumsy fool!" the second Bothan berated him, grabbing Corran's arm to help him regain his balance. "You will indent our entire clan to the sun death of Bothawui. Our greatest apologies, kind sirs. Are either of you injured?" "No, we're fine," Wedge assured him. He glanced at Corran for confirmation, caught just a hint of a frown creasing the other's forehead. On second thought, "Excellent, excellent," the Bothan continued, clearly not really interested in the answer to his question as he took his companion's arm and steered them both towards the shops. "A fine and friendsome day to you, then, fine sirs." Wedge moved close to Corran's side, watching as the 2 Bothans nearly ran down an old human woman at the edge of the crowd and then vanished into the general pedestrian flow. "What's the matter?" he murmured. "Are you hurt?" "No," Corran said slowly, his frown deepening. There was just something that felt wrong about... Abruptly, he slapped at his tunic, his frown exploding into a look of utter consternation. "Droik! He took my wallet!" "What?" Wedge snapped, grabbing for his own pocket, and finding it empty. "Oh, shit! Come on," Corran bit out, diving into the crowd. "I don't believe this," Wedge snarled, diving in after him. "How in space did they pull that off?" "I don't know," Corran called over his shoulder, shoving one pedestrian after another aside. "I would have sworn I knew all the tricks. I don't suppose you happen to notice the clan sigil they were wearing?" "I saw it, but I didn't recognize it," Wedge told him, feeling like a complete and blithering fool. Everything they had, money, credit chits, and both their civilian and military IDs, were in those wallets. "The general's going to kill us if we don't get them back." "Yeah, one at a time and very slowly," Corran agreed darkly. He shouldered his way through one last clump of pedestrians into a temporarily open spot on the walkway and stopped. "Anything?" he asked, craning his neck to look over the crowd. "Nothing," Wedge said, looking around and wondering what in the name of Akbar's aunt they were going to do now. The Bothan government didn't know they were here, and would probably be furious if they found out. Ditto for any New Republic officials. "I don't suppose you might be able to, If I couldn't pick up anything when they were right next to me, I'm not likely to be able to do it at this distance, Corran said, sounding thoroughly disgusted with himself. I hope you've got a backup plan ready. I thought you brought it, Wedge countered glumly. Unfortunately, about all they could do now was get back on their shuttle and rejoin the Peregrine at Ord Tracy. General Bella Bliss, it was rumored, had an awesome repertoire of Corellian invective that only came to the surface when he was absolutely furious. Wedge himself had never personally been able to confirm the rumor. It seemed likely he would soon have the chance to do so. You're never going to live this one down with Mirax, he warned with a sigh. Right. Like you're going to be able to live it down with Ayala? Corran growled back. Hey there, my fine young boys. Join me for a drink? Wedge turned to find an old woman with bright eyes standing beside him. What? I asked you to join me for a drink, she repeated. It's such a warm day, and all that bright sunlight is hard on old eyes like mine. Sorry, but we're a little busy right now, Corran said brusquely, standing on tiptoe to peer again over the crowd. You young people, the woman said reproachfully. Always too busy to sit down and enjoy life. Too busy to listen to the wisdom of the aged. Wedge grimaced, turning his attention back to the crowd and hoping the old fool would take the hint. What she was doing ore digging on the streets of Drefstarn in the first place, he couldn't imagine. Look, ma'am, I'm sorry, but too busy to share a drink with a lonely old lady, she went on, her voice turning sorrowful. That's just plain scandalous, especially when the lonely old lady is buying. Wedge looked back, searching for a firm yet polite way to get her off his back. Look, ma'am, and paused. Her hand had come up now and was holding two items up for his inspection. Two small black folders. Their wallets. Wedge felt his mouth drop open a few millimeters, focusing for the first time on her face. It was the same woman the two pickpockets had bumped into during their hasty getaway. Ah, Corran, he said, reaching out and taking the wallets from the woman's hand. Never mind. What? Corran demanded, the words strangling off midway as Wedge held out his wallet to him. Warily, he took it, his eyes leaving the woman just long enough to confirm that everything was still there. May I ask how you came into possession of these? The woman chuckled, shaking her head. You Corsac people are a stitch. Do they program you for sound, or just feed you the manuals? Corran glanced at Wedge. We like to be precise, he said, his voice cautiously offended. And it's former Corsac. Whatever, she said with a shrug. Either way, you boys ought to be more careful. Those are nice family hollows you've got in there, and I'd hate to see you lose them. Now, Wedge, how about that drink? We really do have a lot to talk about. Yes, why not? Wedge agreed cautiously, a whole list of unpleasant possibilities running through his mind. If she fingered them to the local criminal groups, or worse, to the Vengeance Organization, or even if she merely demanded a hefty reward. You obviously already know our names. And you are? Miranda Savage, she said. Sort of a second-string employee of your old friend Talon Card. And on second thought, you two are buying. The waiter droid delivered their drinks, spilling the obligatory few drops onto the carved stone table, accepted Wedge's coin, and departed. Chakta sake, Miranda said, lifting her glass. Did I get it right, Corran? I've never been sure of the proper Corellian pronunciation for that toast. Close enough, Corran growled, lifting his gaze with obvious reluctance from the datapad and looking at Wedge. Well? Wedge shrugged. It looked okay to me. Okay isn't good enough, Corran said darkly. I also noticed that the only way to confirm that this letter of introduction is really from Card would be to run the ID codes through Coruscant. So get your tails over to the New Republic Liaison office and have them do that, Miranda said, taking a long drink of the pale blue-green liquor she'd ordered. We aren't exactly fed on time here, you know. Yes, Wedge murmured, trying to read the so totally unconcerned face. Unfortunately. Unfortunately, you can't do that, she suggested, peering at Wedge over her glass. Yes, I thought so. Awkward. Why do you say that? Corran demanded. Why do I say what? Miranda countered. That you're on your own, or that that's awkward? The first, Corran said. You sound like you almost expected that. Oh, come on, she said scornfully. I did get a long look into your wallets, remember? What other conclusion is there when you've got your military IDs buried back behind the civilian ones? Exactly, Corran said, fixing her with the kind of glare that Wedge decided was probably standard Corellian security issue. Which means you already knew we couldn't check up on this story before you spun it for us. And what? Created that on the fly? She asked, pointing towards the data card still in his datapad. Or had it sitting in with your collection of a dozen other forgeries, Corran shot back. How are we supposed to know? Lifting her glass, Miranda drained it. Never mind, she said, getting to her feet. I assumed we were on the same side here, and I thought we might be able to help each other. Apparently we can't. Try to hold on to your wallets a little better next time. Wedge looked at Corran, caught the other's fractional nod. Please, sit down, Miranda, he said, half rising from his own chair and catching her arm. It felt painfully thin beneath her sleeve. Please. She paused, throwing a speculative look at each of them. Then, smiling tightly at Wedge, she resumed her seat. A test, I presume. Did I pass? Well, enough for us to at least listen some more, Wedge told her. Let's start with exactly why you're here. Presumably the same reason you are, she said. Card sees an explosion coming, with the Bothans in the middle of it, and wants to see if there are outside forces planning to squeeze the detonators. And you're all he could spare, Corran suggested. Hardly, Miranda said. He's got people all over the New Republic tracking personnel and equipment movements. Other people are sifting through every report and hint and speculation that crops up. I just happen to be the one on the ground here. With what instructions? Wedge asked. Miranda nodded in the direction of the Tap Cafe door. There's a lot of firepower in orbit up there, she said. They could start shooting at each other any time. But if anyone wants to take a poke at Bathawui itself, they'll have to get rid of the planetary shields first. Card asked me to keep an eye on them. Is that why you were hanging around the Drevstarn generator? Wedge asked. Trying to see how someone might get inside? I'd already done that, she said. Actually, I was out there today seeing if I could spot anyone else casing the place. She smiled maliciously. Which is why I latched on to you two. No offense, but you stand out in a crowd like a Wookiee at an Augury family reunion. Wedge nodded, his understanding struck. Is that why you had our pockets picked? So you could find out who we were? Miranda's thin lips twitched. As a matter of fact, no, I didn't. I just happened to be watching when those Bothans lifted your stuff and made sure I'd be in a position to lift it back from them. Wedge looked at Corran. You thinking what I'm thinking? That someone may have noticed us, Corran said, running a careful glance around the Tap Cafe. Could be. I don't suppose you might have any idea who those two pickpockets might have gone to ground, do you? Sorry, Miranda said, shaking her head. I only got here a couple of days ago and haven't had a chance to link up with the local fringe. But you could link up with them if you wanted to, Wedge asked, still trying to get a feel for this woman. Card he more or less trusted, but Card had a huge organization and he couldn't possibly know everyone in it personally. Miranda Savage could easily be playing both ends against the middle, or bleeding Card's organization for her own purposes, or even just using him for free room and board wherever she was between more unsavory jobs. If someone from Vengeance, say, were to offer her a big enough pot of money to betray him and Corran, would she do it? Miranda sighed. Look, Wedge, she said quietly. I used to do a fair amount of con work, and in con work you learn how to read people's faces. I can tell you don't trust me, and I really don't blame you. We have just met, after all. But I've got that letter from Card, and I did get you your wallets back. Offhand, I don't know what else I can do to persuade you. But you do want to persuade us, Corran said. She smiled, a tight, brittle thing. I was given an assignment, she said simply. Wedge suppressed a grimace. He still felt odd about this, but her argument did seem to make sense. If anything turned up later, Corran's Jedi senses would hopefully pick it up. All right, he said. For the moment at least, let's pool resources. Any suggestions? Well, obviously, the first thing we need to do is find out if anyone suspicious has arrived since that orbiting research station was destroyed a week ago, Miranda said, her tone all business now. That's what started this whole military buildup, after all. If Vengeance decided to take advantage of that, they may have needed to move more of their people here. Vengeance or anyone else, Corran murmured. The Empire, for example. Seems reasonable, Wedge agreed. There's only one problem. That information is locked up over in the Bathui customs computers, and we haven't got access to it. Oh, that's no problem, Miranda assured him with an airy wave of her hand. Come on, finish up, and we'll go to your place and talk about it. Sure, Wedge said, taking a long sip from his as-yet untouched drink and getting to his feet. Whatever happened here, he decided, this was going to be most interesting. Not that that was necessarily a good thing. Really, Navitt said into his comlink, looking up as Cliff came into the Exoticalia Pet Emporium and closed the door behind him. Hey, that's great. When can I come by and pick him up? Anytime you wish, the Bothan customs official's voice came from the comlink. From the background came the faint sound of a sneeze. Preferably soon, he added. You bet we will, Navitt said cheerfully. Got customers coming in already wanting to see what we got, and we have to tell them we haven't got anything yet. We can come over now, right? I believe I've already answered that question, the Bothan replied, as another sneeze sounded in the background. Oh, right, Navitt said as Cliff came over. Great. Thanks a lot. A day of peace and profit to you. Yeah, same to you. He shut the comlink off. We're in, he told Cliff, putting the instrument away. And from the sneezing, I'd say at least some of the Bothans are allergic to our little pulpians. Should make them eager to get rid of them, Cliff said. I think it already did, Navitt agreed. You see Horvick? Cliff nodded. He and Penson are in a maintenance staff for that hold-in drive 2 blocks away from that shield generator. Post-closing shift. Perfect, Navitt said. If their schematics were right, that tap cafe was directly over one of the underground conduits carrying power cables into the place. Yeah. Cliff's face soured. Now for the bad news. The 2 Bothan lifters we hired muffed the job. Navitt swore. He should have known better than to trust local talent. They get caught? According to them, the actual lift went smooth as lake ice, Cliff grimaced. It's just that when they got back to me, they didn't have the wallets anymore. Navitt felt his eyes narrow. What do you mean they didn't have them? Just what I said. They lost them. Best guess is that someone in the crowd saw them lift the wallets and return the favor. You sure they didn't just pocket the cash themselves? Cliff shrugged. Not absolutely sure, no. But it's hard to believe a pair of new rep agents would be carrying more cash than I was offering. He pursed his lips. Unless, of course, they aren't new rep agents. Navitt pulled over a chair and settled thoughtfully into it. Could he have been mistaken about them? No, he answered his own question. No, they're new rep, all right. Probably military, too, from the looks of them. The question is, who is this new skifter who's joined the party? You don't think it was just another lifter taking advantage of the situation? Cliff asked. Navitt cocked an eyebrow. Do you? No, not really, Cliff said heavily. Too much danger of getting caught with the goods when the marks woke up. My point exactly, Navitt said. No, they picked up a fringe ally. A very good fringe ally, too, from the sound of it. Cliff hissed softly between his teeth. We don't have anyone to spare for a proper surveillance, he reminded Navid. Maybe we ought to get rid of them. Navid scratched his cheek. It was a tempting suggestion. A tricky job on a tight timetable was bad enough without new rep military agents snooping around. If they could be quietly eliminated. No, he said. Not yet. They can't possibly be onto us. We'll keep an eye out, and if they seem to be taking too much interest in us, we may have to do something about it. But for right now, we'll let them be. Cliff's lip twitched. You're the boss, he said. I hope you're not making a mistake. If I am, it's a mistake that's easily corrected, Navid said, standing up. Come on, let's put on our earnest but stupid faces and go get our animals. And that's the end of the chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.